Is it safe to say that this is the most immersed you've ever been in a pre-draft process?
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. The way we had done it in Detroit was coordinators and position coaches were very much involved, and it's a similar process here in Chicago. I think Ryan's done a phenomenal job in terms of listening to us. We'll still go over our evals as a group. That's coming up in the near future. But we've been able to sit down, me and him, and I mentioned yesterday that the coordinators were involved in the process as well. It's just preliminary round of some of the top guys and what we thought just off the cuff, and it'll be great to get the position coaches involved as well.
When you describe the opportunity of the 4 picks in the top 75 and what that will allow you to do to make progress towards competing this year?
Yeah, it's a great draft to have those day 2 picks. 39, 41, 72, I think those are great value picks this year. You're going to be able to find some really good players that can be contributors, maybe not day 1, but at some point over the course of the season. And we'll see. We have some depth concerns throughout the roster that we're looking to fill. But we feel really good about how the rosters come together through free agency.
I'm sorry, does what you did in free agency afford you the ability to kind of go anywhere in the draft?
Yeah, I think so. We've talked about that. We have a lot of flexibility in what we can do right now. And so I think Ryan and I feel really good about the position we're in.
Because you're how did that vision come to be to have those 2 backs? And what was your input in that process?
Yeah, well, if I remember correctly, because free agency starts first, we acquired Montgomery. He had a heck of a start to his career here in Chicago, and felt good about his play style and how we wanted to play football there in Detroit, and it really translated well. And then when you get into the draft prospects, we viewed Gibbs as more of a weapon, not necessarily 1A, 1B, but more they could coexist and really complement each other's skill set. And to me, that's how you want to construct a roster from all your skill positions. Is you don't want 5, 6, 4 guys necessarily in the receiver room. You want more of a basketball team where you got the point guard, you got the power forward, you have a wealth of different skill sets that you can look to call upon wherever you're at in the field and whatever situation arises.
Kind of going off that, how much are you looking at this running back class with, I guess, the variety of skill sets in this year's deep class?
Yeah, it's there's a lot of flavors to be had here. So value day 1, day 2, all the way through day 3, and I think there's going to be a lot of good undrafted prospects as well this year, particularly at that position. I think they show up each and every year, and so we're really excited. I'll be curious to hear what Eric Bieniemy and he has to say, because I've seen him in the office a few times now, and he'll be like, man, I really like this guy, I really like that guy, and so I know he's passionate about a few of these guys this year.
And because you're an offensive guy, does the offense get a louder voice in the draft room than the defense? Will they get their fair share as well?
I love both sides of the ball and special teams. So listen, everyone's going to be heard. Coach Allen, he'll make sure defense is accounted for, and so will Coach Hightower. So we very much value special teams, and we'll make sure that all 3 phases are we check those boxes.
Ben, when you took the job, you talked about how you were looking forward to working with a mobile quarterback. A lot of people in Detroit took it as a shot at Jared and his lack of mobility. Was that just you having fun with that, or?
It was not a shot at Jared. I've talked to Jared about it. Sometimes your comments get skewed a little bit. That was not my intent. He certainly understands that. It was more directed towards Caleb and what he brings to the table.
Is it strange at all? You were like, I wouldn't use the word God, but beloved in Detroit, and now all of a sudden you're the enemy, so to speak. A lot of people are
Here's what I'll say is I have gone back and forth. My family still lives in Detroit right now, and everybody I've seen face to face has been super supportive and very respectful, and so I certainly appreciate that, and so does my family.
Ben, you mentioned Bieniemy is one part of the big picture, but how and what has that creative process been like with the whole staff as you guys put together your playbook and your plan? How much fun is it?
Yeah, we're still working towards that end right now. Our first step was to get on the same page terminology-wise, and so we went over a lot of the things that we had as a foundation there in Detroit. We went over a lot of film. Declan's been leading that charge. He's done a great job. I haven't been able to be present for every little thing, but I know that they've been able to get through all the Detroit stuff, and I'm looking forward to getting back into the building here end of the week and going into the next week when the players get in, even to start talking about how we can evolve the scheme and best fit our players.
To that end, when you get Caleb in next week or whatever the date is when they can start, like, are there certain elements of his skill set that you're going to have to, like, fine-tune or tweak based on what you saw last year? Maybe some undoing that you have to do or habits that you want to hone differently?
Yeah, I don't know if there's any undoing, but there are some things that we're going to encourage that he looks to do a little bit differently. So, you know, he's been predominantly a shotgun quarterback for most of his high school and college career, and so he's very comfortable there. We're going to work to see the comfort level under center and how much of that applies. We had a lot of success where I was last, that going under center for the run game did translate in play action. Whether that works for us in Chicago, that's what time will tell, right? But there's a lot of ways to skin a cat, and that's the beauty about this coaching staff is we have a lot of different influences from a lot of different systems that we'll be able to bring together a good product.
How much do you think that just having someone who speaks the quarterback language how much can that benefit Caleb as he goes through this process, just even from like the construction of the room to the coaching staff around him?
Yeah, I think you need to be able to see the game as a play caller through the lens of the quarterback and vice versa. He needs to see it through the play caller as well. Why are we calling certain plays? What's the intent of the play? But for me, everything that I do really is to try to set it up within how he sees the game. And so will the rest of the coaching staff as well. Some guys do have quarterback backgrounds, other guys don't, and so we'll take all those opinions into account and see what sticks.
When you finish watching all of Caleb's film, he was open about the sack number, that he takes responsibility for some of those. What are things that you can do as an offense, the coach, with him and with everybody to like help bring that number down?
Yeah, it takes a village. I don't know what the number was in terms of seconds that he held onto the ball before releasing it, but we would certainly like to bring that number down. Part of that is how well can we scheme number one or number two in the progression open for him. The protection up front can get better. The route runners get to their spots faster. We can move the pocket a little bit more. There's a lot of things that we have at our disposal that can help with that process.
When you talk about the players coming in next week, I assume you've thought about that opening kind of speech, opening message. What do you kind of want to get across to the team the first time you get a chance to talk to them?
Yeah, listen, it's a different regime. What happened last year was last year. We're moving on. We're moving past that. I haven't totally formulated what that presentation is going to look like quite yet. I tend to like to procrastinate just a little bit. That's where the best work tends to come out. So I'll figure that out over the weekend, though.
Talk about how success in the modern NFL is quarterback driven, and that's the driving force of success. What are the most important metrics to you to identify quarterback success?
So the way I understand it right now from our analytics team, the EPA in the passing game is really one of the most critical factors in determining wins and losses right now. That's probably changed over the last 5 years or so. I would have said 5 years ago, turnovers, takeaways, that was number one. From what I understand now, that EPA for the passing game has now surpassed that. So whatever team has the higher passing game EPA at the end of the game, they generally win that game. It's over 80% of the time. So it's a huge stat, and that's where we look to how do we help inflate that number, higher completion percentage, more run after catch opportunities. That's not to say we're not going to take our shots down the field and look for big explosive plays, chunks or touchdowns that way, but there's a lot of ways we can get that done.
And you mentioned that when you're trying to see the game through Caleb's eyes and him through yours, in the very earliest stages when the doors open for you guys to spend more time together, what do you focus on first? What are the ways that you guys start to build that?
You go back to the basics, and so it's the fundamentals of the quarterback position. What's our footwork going to look like under center from the shotgun? What are we calling the formations? What's the defensive identification going to look like? So that we're all speaking the same language. We got to get on the same page because it'll be a little bit different for him than what he experienced last year. And if we can mesh together and start speaking the same language, that's when things will really start to take off.
Then what kind of coach are the Jets getting in Tanner Eckstrom? How important was he to helping you build that offense?
Tanner's a stud. Tanzer's an absolute stud. Someone I leaned on heavily. He was the pass game coordinator there last year in Detroit, and he and I would have several late nights each week where just me and him in my office and going over what he saw. He would try to give me some information ahead of time, and he's called games in the past at the college level, and I think AG got a really good one for him going forward.
When it comes to Braxton Jones, can you give us a health update? And from what you've seen on tape, could you envision him playing left tackle in your offense?
I think he's right on track, and so will that mean he's limited in training camp? I would say probably at this point, but I think the progress is right where it needs to be right now. And yes, absolutely. Listen, the number one thing, in my opinion, that tackles need to do is pass protect, okay? And so I think he's got the feet to get that done. We're going to challenge him to maybe gain a little bit more weight so that he can anchor a little bit better in pass pro. But everything I've seen so far has shown a phenomenal athlete out there on the edge that we feel like we can work with.
When you look at some of the numbers from last year, the 68 sacks or the team averaging only 3.5 yards per carry, which of those bothers you more as you look to form and build your new offense with this team?
Listen, we got to protect the quarterback. To me, that's number one. I just talked about how important the passing game metric is in modern football, and so that's a huge deal for us. And naturally, those two go hand in hand. If you're able to protect, generally you have a good offensive line. If you have a good offensive line, generally you're able to run the ball. The backs have a lot to say with that as well. And so I think those two metrics really do tie together to a degree.
What was it like working with John Morton in 2022? How was he, I guess, an asset to you?
John is a fanatical worker. He was always the first one in the building and the last one to leave. He helped me immensely as a first-year coordinator really see the game. He had worked with Sean Payton. He had worked with John Gruden, a lot of really good coaches, and he was able to really influence the direction of our passing game that way. And I'll forever be grateful for the conversations we had, and I think he's going to do a great job there in Detroit.
Sit down with Adam Hogue yesterday. You were talking about how intrigued you are with the slot position, how the ball in Detroit tended to find that person. Detroit down with St. Brown. I know you guys made a couple of acquisitions from players that could fill that role for you, but it's important to you to get your best player in that spot because the ball tends to find that person so much, so you try to get them.
Listen, I think that's to be determined. It's a little bit different right now. Can DJ play inside? I think he can. Can Rome play inside? I think he can. Both those guys showed those traits last year on tape. To what degree, I don't know yet. We got to hit the grass and see what they're really capable of and what they do well. But I feel really good about the two guys we brought in free agency and what they bring to the table. It's just naturally, whether it was Jarvis Landry or Danny Amendola or St. Brown the last few years there in Detroit, those guys were really the focal point of the passing game where I've been in the past.
Ben, what's been your evaluation of Tyreek Stevenson?
He's a young player that's still learning. He's still growing. He's still maturing. But you see all the athletic traits and you see the potential. That's always a dangerous word to throw out there. But I'm really encouraged. I've had a good conversation with him on the phone. I know DA has and Al Harris have as well. And so I'm really excited to get him in the building and get our hands on him and work to bring out the best in him.
How much of those conversations were about last year with the Hail Mary and everything?
Very little. I'm just getting to know these guys on a personal level in the off season, and then we'll dive into more football once they get in the building.